let's talk about the teams that didn't qualify then. Vegas, let's start with that. They got top 8, but it wasn't enough to qualify for champs. Where do you think they could have found a couple more points this season to try and get it? Do you think it was probably like last major when they didn't really play well at Major 4, and that was sort of the biggest missed opportunity this season?
I'd have to go back and look at all their matches, but I feel like it's kind of like throughout the whole year. I mean, like when they go to listen-ins, like they just sound like defeated, like they don't like really want to play. And I feel like you have to go into the entire year like going hard as fuck.
What do you think, Chris? I agree with Preston. Like their listenings at time or
Their listenings are fucking pathetic.
Yeah.
And I can speak more freely now, considering that Vegas team had opportunities to make that run towards the end of the year. It's not like they had a roster that like was supposed to win everything, right? Like it wasn't like that. But I think they could have been a little bit better than they played off. But I just think that the team environment is awful. I feel like anytime that team had a little bit of like adversity, or they lost a map or a close map or anything of that sense, like it was bad. Their listenings were always super toxic. I just feel like that team's like communication and like environment is just not good to be in.
I'm pretty sure I've seen them win matches and still like be yelling at each other, and I'm just like, what is happening over there? Like, how is that a thing right now? Like, yeah, hype a little bit, you know?
My thing is just like, I even have a problem with this myself. I'm sure, Preston, you could probably agree with that, but like always wanting to like be better and winning, and like I get that, but bro, like the older I get, it's just like I feel like that environment of people that have the argument, you don't need good vibes. It's not like necessarily good vibes, but it's just like some sort of like hope or optimism or anything of the sort to like have an environment that's just like not miserable. I feel like that team specifically, the way they talk to each other and just like the way their communications were with each other, only in listenings from what we can see, if that's what we're seeing publicly from the little that we get to see from the outside looking in, there's no way that wasn't fucking hell to scrim with all year. If you lose one map in a series, you can't just shut down. Like, dude, when did you lose, Preston, in Major 1?
I think round 2 maybe.
Round 2, regardless, it was a loser's run, is my point.
Yeah.
You guys have the most major wins now, and you guys won both of them through losers.
Yeah.
Like, did you see my point? Like, I feel like anytime like that team didn't get their way after like a winner's round match or something in like in Major 4 or stuff, like I feel like they just like broke down and just got shit on, and like
like once they started losing, like they just went down a rabbit hole. It wasn't like they lost and they can bounce back from it. Like definitely looked tough for them to do that.
Yeah, and you don't need fake good vibes, but you don't need shitty toxic environments all the time. And I feel like that's like that was like their end for the rest of the season. I feel like that shit's never going to get you anywhere, and like that's fixable, but I feel like that is like extremely overlooked, because no matter how talented you are or no matter how good your team is, if your environment's going to be like shitty and just miserable to be all the time, like it's very rare that you get 4 players that can perform 100% in that kind of environment. It just like almost doesn't exist, and I feel like that is just gonna fucking kill them. That team has a very good foundation, in my opinion. I do think they can do pretty well next year, but if they don't fix that aspect of them, it will never, it doesn't fucking matter.
You guys have been on a couple of teams where like even you're down 0-2, it's like this reverse sweep is easy. Like we know we can beat these kids next 3 maps, and you do it. It never seemed like Vegas was that team to ever do it. They only 3-0'd a team once this year. It was at this event. I think to your point, they just get into this like mindset where it's just hypercritical on every mistake, and they're just not able to like compartmentalize things and then just kind of keep that confidence rolling. And you listen to listen-ins and people are like, you're up 100 and people are annoyed.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is like
it's just like what's going on here? Go ahead.
I feel like it wouldn't be bad if it was like only in practice where they would do that. Like, because obviously different players work different ways. So like if that's the way they learn, then I get it. But if they go into a match and they're like criticizing each other and like getting annoyed, like that's different. But like if they're just doing that practice and then going in the match going hard as fuck and just wanting to win, that would be so much better than going in and kind of just doing the same thing.
Yeah, but to counteract your point on that, they weren't learning much. They weren't doing good like all year. So like if that was technically the environment in practice, it wasn't fucking working. So like I don't know.
What I'm saying is like, because like they go into matches and still kind of have that mentality.
Well,
they could have played a lot better throughout their matches if they did have.
No, for sure. Like you can,
hard, you know?
You can definitely afford to be toxic to each other or really hard on each other in practice, and then show up to the match to drop it all and be like, all right, let's fucking try and let's do this, and then let's go back to yelling at each other after. I get where you're coming from, but I just think like getting on every day to scrim in that environment, I don't care who you are, eventually gets tiring. Like it's gonna be another fucking day where I'm gonna sit there and fucking people are gonna bitch and moan, or I'm gonna bitch and moan myself, whatever it is. It's like I don't want to hear. Like I feel like that just gets very tiring, and I don't think that's like a sustainable environment for an entire season. Maybe for one major,
not wanting to play. Like you don't want to play. Like
and then you don't. And I feel like when you have that attitude, which is like almost impossible to avoid, you don't play at the best of your ability, and you're not creative, you're not finessing things, like it's just, I think everything just spirals downhill. And I feel with how competitive this league is, there's no room for that anymore. That's like what that team needs to fix. that shit.
No,
Yeah,
100%.
I want to ask you this, Chris, because there are some older players, many of whom are retired. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just trying to devil's advocate here because I want you to respond to this. Of like, well, back in the day on old Complexity, we used to roast each other all the time, but at the end of the day, we still pulled up and smoked everybody. Like, what's your response if someone said that about you don't just need to be a vibes team?
You just named Preston's point. Like, Complexity was a team that used to roast each other all the time. And first of all, Complexity was not competing against competition this year. People were going to school and playing them. Like, the competition back then, I can even attest to this because I was the competition back then, and I played all the way up until a couple of years ago. Like, I think the competition now, not saying talent-wise, you can make your arguments for talent or whatever, but like the fact of the matter is that it's a full-time career and job now, where back then I had a job and I was going to school, which most people were doing. But regardless of the competition to that, also what Preston said, they weren't being toxic to each other in matches. Those guys were going dumb hard to win those matches. Those guys are always going super, super hard and like going crazy and keeping that attitude. Like, they never showed up to a match and just, bro, if that Complexity team lost a match or if they lost a couple maps or they went down 0-2, they never just rolled over and died because they were arguing with each other and bitching at each other and stuff like that. They usually made the reverse sweep and won the tournament somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, your point to that is what Preston said. Those guys could have been super toxic to each other. I do think they were a rare team that actually did have like 4 people that could actually scream at each other and then, you know, put it all to the side. That's very rare. It's almost impossible to find. And even that, like, yeah, they were winning. And they also had a roster that was also incredibly talented to compare to the competition that they had. Like, I don't think that Vegas roster has the talent that they could just bully people, even if they're in a bad mood. You see my point? Yeah, that's like a very unfair comparison for that anyway. But regardless,
I know
point,
it's unfair. That's why. Listen, that's why I phrased it that way. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because I agree with you. This conversation's come up a bunch. Like, it came up last year with the old New York team. Like, they had a similar kind of problem. Like, other teams in the past in the CDL have similar problems. And I agree with you, Chris. It's like if you run that environment, there's no trust. There's no trust. There's little accountability, and you're not going to overperform, which is what you need to do to win tournaments. You need to be the best team, and that attitude's not going to get you there. And I think it's why Clay came on. I don't know if it was this or he was talking about the breakdown, but talking about how Major 4 was like a weird environment for them because there's no crowd. They felt like they would practice and they couldn't be open with each other because there were all these teams around them. And then my response to that is like, it's like it was a weird environment, but I don't think that's a valid excuse because everybody had to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely.
And unlike the other teams just managed it, right? You guys were sitting there behind the fucking stage for 90% of the tournament. So like, you know, I just think going forward, look, I don't think the team was that bad. At the end, they were actually a pretty good respawn team. Yeah, the search started to fall off a little, but like they grinded out Game 5 series when they needed to. Like they had a win condition if they had played the way they played at Major 5 with the T8. I think they probably would have qualified for champs, but there were too many points during the season where they were just lost. And I'm very curious what Vegas do going forward because I know a number of people like Clay are free agents on the team. Like, are they going to try and run it back in some form? You're going to look to make some upgrades because this is a much better Vegas/Paris franchise than past years where they were just a non-factor all season. Like they actually got in the mix this year. Yeah. I'm just curious what they do to improve on that.
Yeah. No. With all the shit that I just gave them, like they did use the year to lay a very good foundation for that Vegas organization for like the first time I think ever in the CDL. Like, and I think they could definitely make it better. But I just think in general with that team, if they really want to compete at a higher level, I just think that environment is not something that you're going to deal like anyone could deal with for like 6 to 7 months and want to like it's just you're not going to play your best. Like period.
It's just a mindset switch. Like you have to just realize like you're not gonna win every single match you play. Like
no one does.
So when you lose a map or two, like you can't just like lose full and just throw it out the window like and just lose a series because of it. Like this is all mindset and I don't know. They just have to realize that, I guess.
I think they are in a better spot than they've ever been in their CDL organization history. I think they can still do very good and like figure it out from there. It depends on obviously who stays and who doesn't and stuff. But yeah, I just think like that will always hurt them if like you lose a map or two in a series and all of a sudden everyone's like arguing with each other. It's like, yo, like we could at least win the match and then figure it out from there. But it definitely seems odd.